morning, good afternoon, and good evening from where you're connecting from. Welcome to yet another Reach Law webinar. Today, our main focus is UK Reach, more specifically, what is the story, the current status, and the path for your compliance. The presenter today are myself, Pietro Di Tondo, Director of the UK subsidiary, and Amy Farron, our Principal Consultant, both based in our UK office in Manchester. A little bit about myself. I have a degree in chemistry, both undergraduate and postgraduate from the University of Manchester, and I have over a decade experience in the regulatory field, having worked in both the pharmaceutical industry and also in the polymer industry before joining here at Reach Law. Now, Amy, if you can please introduce yourself for the audience.
Yeah, of course. So, hi everybody, welcome to our webinar. I'm Amy Farron. I joined Reach Law in 2021 as Principal Consultant. After my degree in Analytical and Forensic Science, I've worked in the PhysChem department of a contract laboratory, testing industrial chemicals for EU Reach purposes. So I then made the move to consultancy, where I have since gained almost 10 years experience working in regulatory, specialising in EU and now UK Reach. So I'll hand you back to Pietro for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. So now, in order to allow you to focus better on the webinar, we will turn on our camera off, and then I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Let's have a look at the agenda. It's pretty packed. We're going to go through all these points. So we think it allows a good structure, and we will aim to complete the webinar within the 60 minutes. So as usual, we will start with our Reach Law brief to those who do not know us yet, and then we will set the scene with a bit of an overview on what UK Reach is and the UK state and the current status. After that, we will move into the hot topic, the alternative transitional registration model. And then we will look at a technical part led by Amy, where she will discuss about the UK Reach inquiry and the new registration of existing substances, as well to provide very important tips in order to stay compliant and to achieve compliance. Last but definitely not least, we will look at all the questions that were submitted, as well as we will try to answer as many as we can over the chat. So let's start with who we are, what is our company, and what is our focus. So we are a chemical regulatory consultancy firm providing support for REACH and REACH-like regulation globally. We have several locations. Our Manchester office here in the UK. Then we have a little office in Brussels, in Belgium. We have a Turkey office in Istanbul. We also have a new office in New Delhi, as well as one of our latest part of the family member is our Seoul office in South Korea. And last but definitely not least, our newest registered office in Kiev in Ukraine. And obviously, everything is coordinated by our head office in Helsinki, Finland, where we have a base next to the ECHA building. Very, very strategic of us. We know we provide a full set of service to allow company to gain market access to chemical products on different regulations. So we will produce basic registration. We also provide OR service and also outsourcing. And most of our business also involves training and consultancy and provide technical support. So we do cover most of the action in relation to REACH and REACH-like regulation. As said before, our office in the UK is based in sunny Manchester, in the Salford Keys, where we do provide all the service in relation to UK Reach, especially only representative. As mentioned before, our YouTube channel called Reach Law Talks. where you can find all the information and all the different previous webinars that we gave in the past. So we do appreciate your support on our channel. So if you do like, please subscribe to the channel. A bit of an overview of what's happening globally. So we have obviously the main focus of this webinar is UK reach, so we will treat this specifically. So across the different countries, we have a Turkey reach. We have Turkey reach, and where the late pre-registration still ongoing, re-registration dossier preparation and submission ongoing on co-registration activities. And we have started to letter of access hindrance. Now, the India BIS and license already is in force and governs quality on safety and reliability requirements for certain chemical products on the Indian market. The K-REACH in Korea, the 31st of December 2021 deadline for the registration and CMR substances already passed, but now the next registration deadline is on the 31st of December 2024 for the substance between 100 and 1,000. Lastly, we also have EU REACH, where the registration dossier updates and the new registration on UCLI updates and the ECHA guidance authorization are being currently updated. So please monitor this, but we will also do for our client. As far as Ukraine REACH and CLP have now been approved, and will enter into force on the 26th of January 2025. From the first time, the pre-registration phase lasting the 12 months and start a follow-up registration by staggered registration deadlines, depending on the tonnage hazard, and the Ukraine CLP enter into force on the 15th of November 2024, and the CLP notification need to be submitted by 15th of November 2025. Now, just a few disclaimers before we go further into the presentation. To keep our legal department happy, I must inform you that the content of this presentation is for general information and purpose only, and is not substitute for consultation with professional expert in this area. Therefore, any action you might take based on this presentation is under your own responsibility and risk. No representation or warranties are made with regards of the completeness of the accuracy of the content on this presentation, and no liability is accepted by REACH law. Also, we reserve all the rights of this information, and this is our intellectual property of REACH law. So now that we finished with the boring stuff, we can start with the good stuff. So UK REACH and the current status. So the UK REACH, registration, evaluation, authorization, and restriction of chemicals came into force in Great Britain on the 1st of January 2021. This is the new framework governs the manufacture, import, and the use of chemical in England, Wales, and Scotland, with some compliance tasks potentially managed by companies in Northern Ireland. UK REACH aims to ensure the high level of protection for human health and environment while maintaining competitiveness and for the UK industry. So what is UK REACH, which also answers one of the most common questions that we received. UK REACH is EU REACH as it was on the 1st of December 2020, plus all the statutory instruments that were added afterwards following Brexit, also including the various implementing regulations. The competent authority for UK REACH is the HSE, Health and Safety Executive, which are equivalent of ECHA for EU REACH. The platform used is called Comply with UK REACH, which is also equivalent to REACH IT. So The main requirements of UK REACH are effectively the same as EU REACH. So there are registration, where substance must be registered if they enter in the market of 1 ton or more. Authorization applied to substance uses included in Annex 14, also known as the authorization list. This restriction is comply with the restriction with Annex 17 of the REACH and UK REACH framework. And the use of compliance basically is the use of substance and mixture according to the provision provided by the SDS, so the guidance on stage use and authorization condition. As far as communication, it's important to communicate all the substance that are substance of very high concern in article to all the recipients. So the focus of this webinar will be mainly on the registration process, status, and what the measure that can be achieved for the compliance. But before we continue to set the scene, it's important to also remind everyone, or to tell everyone who never heard of UK REACH, the important consequence of UK REACH on a legal role. So before GB manufacturer, there were pre 1st of January 2021. Following Brexit, they remain as GB manufacturer under UK REACH as well. GB important sourcing from non-European country or European Economic Area Northern Ireland continues to stay as GB important. Finally, which is the main change, GB downstream user at GB distributors sourcing chemical from Europe or the European Economic Area, including Northern Ireland, now become GB important under UK REACH. So GB important must be covered by a UK registration, which before used to be covered by a normal EU registration. As far as the legal roles is similar to EU REACH, so we also will have manufacturer, importer, downstream user, formulator or end user, and also distributor. More terminology and definitions. So we have existing substances, which were the substances that have been EU REACH registered by anyone, by any time, at the time of exits. So these are substances that are normally called transitional substance, as they were all subjected to transitional provision, such as labeling, grandfathering, new registration of existing substance, and also with the standard registration deadlines. New substance, on the other hand, are all the substances that do not meet the existing substance definition. The substances are subject to standard UK REACH registration requirement according to the legal text and are not subject to transitional provision. Therefore, if you're not registered, you must register before entering the market. Existing supply, this applied to substances that were imported into Great Britain between the 1st of January 2019 and the 31st of December 2020. This is also called the transitional status or provision. The deadline for providing the initial information for UK REACH was the 30th of April 2021, which is also known as a grandfathering. So this allowed the company to obtain the EU registration active in the UK. This was specifically effective for GB company. Although the deadline has passed, you can still submit an information to the authority if you have performed the relevant due diligence and assessment. So the window is still open even for grandfathering. As far as other registration, GB importer of existing substance from Europe, European Economic Area and Northern Ireland, that are registered the substance can also keep the status and enter the market thanks to the downstream user import notification. So, and also, although the original deadline was the 27th of October 2021, it's still possible to this date to continue to submit late due based on the status, as long as the substance is within the transitional period that are presented in the previous slide. So before in the 2019 and 2020, that's very important. As far as the registration required, the grandfathering, a bit of a recap in the slides. So the registration threshold, we will also look in the further slide, it remains the same. So anything that is imported or manufactured at the quantity of 1 ton or more must be registered. The grandfathering option for GB-based company with previous EU-REACH registration help to transfer those to the UK system. So, and still applicable if you have assessed that this is a possibility. As far as downstream user import notification, UK downstream user or importers could still submit a downstream user import notification, also known as DUIN, for known substance to benefit of the extended registration deadlines. What we noticed over the last couple of years specifically, it was a bit of a widespread misunderstanding of the DUIN eligibility. It's important to remind everyone that DUIN is applicable and is applied to existing GB, Great British Joint users or distributors under the UK having a EU-REACH registration and have imported this or entered the market between 2019 and 2020. The only representative option still applicable, so non-GB manufacturer could appoint a GB-based only representative to submit DUINs on behalf of the GB customer. But the most important thing that we notice that people and companies still having grasped is the real misunderstanding is that a downstream user import notification is not equivalent to a registration. This is a measure to safeguard the supply chain. So it's important to make a full assessment. If you need support, you can ask any professional consultancy firm such as REACH Law to help you with the assessment of your substances. In all the other cases, you must first inquire and then register the substance before placing in the market, just as it would happen without Brexit and the normal EU-REACH. So you then, as usual, you submit an inquiry and then you submit a new registration of an existing substances. As far as the substance registration status, all manufacturer or importer of substance, such as entering the market 1 ton or more, will also have the same tonnage band as it happens under EU-REACH. So you have the 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000, and all over 1,000 ton. So the registration side are similar as well. So you got the full substance registration, the on-site isolating intermediate with strictly controlled condition must apply, and the transport and isolated intermediate, where the strictly controlled condition still applies in the whole of the supply chain. So you have the joint submission, where is follow the same format of the EU-REACH with the principle of one substance, one registration, where you have a lead registrant and different co-registrant joining the joint registration. The data and the cost sharing is fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory. And obviously, it's always important to keep up to date with all the different scenario and updates based on your supply chain. As far as the registration requirements, these are also similar. So the higher tonnage you go, the more information are required to comply with the relevant annex of the regulation. So similar to EU-REACH, chemical safety report is required for a registration ton from 10 or more. And all the other is important to keep an eye of what is applicable to your business specifically. As far as the registration deadlines, again, the statutory instruments that I was telling you in the initial slides of what UK-REACH is, have defined the deadlines. So the latest statutory instrument, more specifically the SI 722 that was delivered in 2023, it was actually published in July 19 of 2023, and with the amendation of Article 41, basically helped to postpone the original deadlines, all of them by 3 years. So we originally had that instead of the 2026, it was 2023, and then the 2028 were postponed again, so from 25, and then the latest one, 2030, was originally 2027. Non-existing substance supply above 1 ton, obviously, if you this apply to you before placing in the market, must be registered, and also all the new substance as well. The model here, the same concept in the UK REACH, the joint submission concept still applies. So you have co-registrants, they can submit by a lead registrant, and then the lead registrant then submit to the authorities to get a joint submission process. So the different interaction between the different methodology, they all feed into the joint registration here in the center with the relevant deadline. So you got GB-based manufacturer that can obviously keep the registration live with the grandfathering process, and then you got the downstream user for GB importers and UKOR of existing substance. They can feed into the joint registration by this methodology. And lastly, all new substance and new client entering the market will lead to perform a new registration of existing substance. So how this feeds into the system? So you got the grandfather there. Yeah. Well, the registration will become, after submitting registration, you will become a member of the substance group, and then you will have to work with the substance group at a later stage to finish the submission. Then you got the dueling approach, where you become a member of the substance group after you submit an inquiry, but you can still also place the substance in the market, which is obviously is beneficial. And then the NRES approach, which is the new registration of existing substance, you have to submit an inquiry first, and then after you submit an inquiry, you become a member of the substance group, and then you can submit the deferred registration, which allow you to place the substance in the market in Great Britain. After that, you have to select the lead registrant and work with the member of the substance group together towards the full registration. And just to add additional background, when I refer to the substance group, this is effectively the same as the SIF, Substance Information Exchange Forum, that we had under the current European framework, EUREACH. So that's the full process. And then we'll help you through, guide you through once the lead registrant is there, assigned and selected. Obviously, for more details, you can refer back to this presentation once the slide go up on our ritual talk. But we'll also have additional webinar that we gave in the past that you can also look more technicality of the process. As far as the fees concerned, so these are the same as currently these are the ones that are applicable for large company. These were effectively converted at the time of Brexit, so it was just a conversion from euros to British pounds with the HSC inquiry fees and downstream using information fees that were not applicable, so were effectively free of charge, but all the other were a simple conversion. One of the main questions that we received in advance of the webinar was whether there were a revision of the fees. We believe, and the authority are looking to look into the fee registration, but at the same time, I must remind you all that if you do need to enter the market now, the official fees are available on the HSE website, but for large company, these are the fees applicable. So it's important, if you need to enter the market right now, these are the fees applicable. We have no vision and we cannot predict when a new fees will be implemented. So until it's official, these are the fees. And yet again, for those who are outside Great Britain, just wanted to remind you, you can still appoint an only representative, such as Rich Law, that can help you with the substance registration and help you to enter the UK market. So who are only representative? These are companies that have a sufficient background on the practical of the handling of the substance and the information related to them. So a trusted representative can also help you with all the different phases of the UK REACH registration, such as downstream user import notification, can help you with the grandfathering perhaps, registration as well, and also authorization and group GB CLP notification. So now let's talk specifically on the very much of an hot topic, the alternative transitional registration model. So what is this and what it came about? So basically, the Secretary of State for the Environment announced back in December 2021 that DEFRA has committed to explore an alternative arrangement for UK REACH transitional registration in order to support chemical businesses whilst upholding the highest standard to safeguard the public health and the environment. This is a result of the work undertaken by the HSE, the Environment Agency, DEFRA, but also the Trade Association and industry to investigate potential options to reduce the burden on cost to registrants. Since then, there was a very little information available, but has been until now. But 30 months later, more specifically in May 2024, it was announced around the time of Chem UK, 16th of May, a consultation was launched. So as far as the alternative transitional registration model, so what is it? What it stands for is on the slide there. DEFRA, this was announced by DEFRA and the HSE and the Environmental Agency in 2023. It was with the aim to significantly reduce the cost, and the idea was around 2 billion cost to the industry associated with buying and accessing EU hazard information as part of the UK REACH registration. In response to the concern of the data, the government first extended the registration deadlines, which we had all covered in the previous slide, and then to develop this alternative transitional registration model. This model aims to reduce the cost to the business by reducing the needs to purchasing expensive data from EU REACH consortia and data holder when the transition from the EU REACH to UK REACH while maintaining a high standard to protect health to human and environment. Furthermore, we have the current consultation include the new impact assessment, which estimates the model will reduce the total cost to the transition to the UK REACH by around 70%. More specifically, there was an estimate around £500 million of British pounds, which obviously a big number. The cost reduction is considered by both reduction of the hazard information and the increased provision of the use and exposure information. So what are the objective key elements in transitional evaluation? So let's go back again to when the consultation started on May the 16th. So the DEFRA, the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, launched this consultation with the aim to exploring the alternative transitional registration model for transitional registration. The consultation was originally set to run until the 11th of July, but then was extended to the 25th of July. The objective was, again, maintain the UK REACH framework while reducing the data acquisition cost to the business, with the key element to reduce the hazard and data requirement for transitional substances, and also enhance the use of exposure information. The transitional evaluation gave new powers to the regulators and request specifics to this and also summaries. Additional feature of the alternative registration model are the one substance, one registration. So model still applies. So registrants are required to work within the substance group, submitting hazard information through the lead registrant. Streamline restriction process, which is aimed to accelerate the regulatory action. The animal testing minimization, which effectively is the real reason to implement REACH back in the day. So basically, this will help to reduce the testing and minimize the testing on vertebrate animal, and also to minimize to greater the standard under UK REACH as well. And the chemical safety reports alignment. So chemical safety reports will be expected to be aligned with the reduced hazardous requirement, as it only will be applicable to the UK REACH. As far as consultation and implementation of the timeline, so if we recap, what happened was the consultation was launched by DEFRA on the 16th of May 2024. Then the government response was expected 12 weeks after, which doing a bit of math, it was originally set for the 17th of October 2024 of this year. But then we received a few weeks ago a latest update on the 13th of November 2024. They've reported that the summary will be provided in 2025. Then after the summary will be provided, we will also have a registration process, and which will follow a second consultation on the legal adaptation of the text. And finally, after this is performed, a new guidance need to be drafted and finalized for the first registration deadline, which is currently still set on the 27th of October 2026. So we are looking specifically at those deadlines, and one of the questions asked pre the webinar was regarding the registration, potential registration deadline extension. Well, we don't know, but the math is that realistically we can say it's a possibility, but at the moment it's important for everyone to work towards the same deadlines, which is the original one set for the 27th of October 2026. So now we can move into a more technical part of the presentation, which will be given by Amy. So Amy, please take it away on the technical part.
Okay, thank you, Pietro. So yeah, let's take a deep dive into the technical side of the UK REACH inquiry and the NRES process. So next slide, please. So before a UK REACH registration can be submitted, an inquiry must be submitted and accepted by the HSC. So what we're saying is that the inquiry is basically the first step for any new registration. And what a successful inquiry will do is it will place you into the correct substance group. Next slide. So what we've just established is that submitting a UK REACH Article 26, also known as an inquiry, is necessary as the first step for any new registration. The inquiry is then reviewed by the HSC to determine your substance ID. Therefore, this inquiry must include all of the relevant analytical data to allow for the correct identification of that substance, thus allowing the HSC to determine that it is indeed the correct substance to be registered. Once your inquiry has been accepted by the HSC, you'll then be placed into the correct substance group and your registration process can continue from here. Next slide. So we really just want to bring this home now and to stress the importance of the inquiry. Without one, you cannot register your substance under UK REACH. Well, that is, unless of course you've grandfathered your existing registration, but we'll park that scenario for now. Next slide, please. So now we'll take a closer look at what the substance group is. This can be found in the Comply with UK REACH account system, and it's basically where the data sharing discussions can take place. A successful inquiry will place your substance into the correct substance group, but also this will be along with all the other inquirers and companies that grandfathered the same substance. So within the substance group, the members can elect the lead registrant and choose how to cooperate for the development of the joint registration. If you are the lead registrant, however, after you've submitted your lead registration dossier, you can then prepare and share the joint registration dossier and also share the relevant data with the co-registrants so that they may submit their registrations in due course. Next slide, please. The HSE will assess the analytical data submitted within the inquiry dossier and assign the substance to the relevant substance group. It's important to be aware that as a member of the substance group, members will then have access to each other's contact details. So we would say be prepared to get contacted from time to time whilst the substance group is sort of being established and the lead registrant is being elected and things like that. So keep an eye on that. Some good advice is to actively engage in discussions within your substance group. So sort of don't sit back and wait for people to contact you. You know, you can actively engage with these discussions and start participating in them. So these discussions, they may cover topics such as appointing lead registrant, as we've just covered, registration strategies, data gaps, additional testing, and cost sharing models. Don't forget to keep your contact details up to date. It's advisable to allow access, I'd say, for more than one person within your organisation to have access to your Comply with UK REACH account. Next slide, please. Note that only once your inquiry has been accepted by the HSE and you are a member of the substance group, the registration dialogue will only then be available, and that can be found within your Comply with UK REACH account. Next slide, please. So now we'll have a look at the inquiry dossier preparation. Our Euclid is the software used and it's freely available. It's the key software application for both regulatory bodies and the chemical industry. So for the inquiry dossier, the below sections have to be completed. So we're looking at section 1.1 for identification, section 1.2 relates to composition, and section 1.4, this is for the analytical data reports. Once the information has been populated, the inquiry dossier is ready to be exported for submission to the HSE, and that is actually done by the Comply with UK REACH system. Next slide, please. So if we take a closer look now at what analytical data is required for the inquiry dossier, the laboratory report must provide the following. We've got the molecular and structural formulae, there's the composition and purity of the substance, and then we've got the spectral data, and I would say perhaps any other analytical information with the primary aim of verifying the identity and composition of the substance that you wish to register under UK REACH. Next slide. The general tests for organic substances are as follows. You've got your UV, IR, NMR, that's for identification purposes. And then we have GC, GCMS, LCMS, or HPLC, that's for quantification. And then if we look at the general tests for inorganic substances, we've got XRD, XRF for identification. And we've got IC or ICP-MS, ICP-OES, and titration for quantification. If you have the facilities on site, you can produce your own analytical data, but if not, you can also reach out to your contract laboratory. Next slide, please. The analytical data is required when submitting an inquiry, and the reports actually do form part of the full registration dossier. So you have to physically attach them into the dossier. So we suggest that you obtain this data and submit your inquiries now, especially on substances that you know you need to register. And this will set you off on a great path to your compliance under UK REACH. In our experience, now we're talking with EU REACH experience, the contract laboratories get super busy and they reach capacity actually much sooner than you would anticipate as we head towards the registration deadlines. So to prevent any potential delay to your UK REACH registrations, if you have any testing obligations, we highly recommend that you contact your chosen laboratory sooner rather than later. Or of course, if we've just discussed, you can begin those in-house studies. Okay, next slide, please. So now let's look at some tips and tricks to help you with those UK REACH inquiries. Good analytical information is vital for a successful inquiry. Now, it does sound obvious, but the analytical reports need to prove that your substance is of the identity that you are actually reporting in the inquiry dossier. Within the reports, there should be a sufficient description of the methods used. What we mean by that is that enough so that anybody could replicate the analysis based on the information provided. The reports must also include spectra. Again, what we mean by this is not just the methods and a results table. That won't be sufficient. It's got to contain the spectra. The composition reported in section 1.2 of our Euclid must match the results of the analytical reports in section 1.4. And again, this might sound really simple and obvious, but within the compositional section, you must provide both the concentration range and the typical concentration, and that's for all constituents. Okay, next slide, please. Continuing on with the tips and tricks for the Euclid dossier, we've got the sum of the components and impurities must equal 100%. If not, you might need to add some unknown impurities or even a justification. Remember to report the reason for the inquiry within the actual dossier creation. Don't forget to use iEuclid's validation assistant, and that's to check both the dossier and the dataset. And then you will be notified by email of the progress of your submitted inquiry. So go and check that your email is up to date and that's correct within your Comply with UK REACH account. Next slide, please. REACH Law attended Chem UK, I think back in May this year, and the message from DEFRA was actually quite simple. Submit your inquiry dossiers as early as possible. This will provide you access to the substance group where you can participate in those discussions on data sharing and much more, as we previously mentioned. Okay, next slide, please. So next up, we'll take a closer look at the NRES process. Next slide. Now, NRES stands for New Registration of Existing Substance. Next slide. So, NRES overview, how does it work? Companies that cannot benefit from late doing or grandfathering of substances under existing supply must first register before they can place their substance on the GB market. Where the substance has been EU REACH registered by anyone, hence an existing substance, your company may be able to, as part of a new registration of existing substance process, defer the submission of the full information requirement to a later time, meaning that the company can join the joint registration and share data with other transitional registrants. And the HSE will notify you when your inquiry has been accepted, should this process apply to you. Next slide. Firstly, an inquiry dossier is needed for the NRES process to begin. This is something that must be submitted to the HSE, and that's done by the Comply with UK REACH system, and that's for any new registration. Just to reiterate, the purpose of the inquiry dossier is to verify your substance ID. Once the HSE has accepted your inquiry, you'll be put into the relevant substance group. The registration process can continue from there, and that does include those participation in the data sharing negotiations. Next slide, please. Now we'll have a look at the steps of the NRES process. In order to qualify, we know that the substance needs to be EU REACH registered, but not classed as being under existing use. The inquiry dossier needs to be prepared, submitted and accepted by the HSE. That's the first step. Next up, we have part one, which is what the deferred registration. This step needs to be completed before placing your substance on the GB market, and it will involve a HSE fee. I think we've looked at those earlier. And then we have part two, the joint submission. It's important to mention that at this stage of the MRES process needs to be completed relevant to the registration, prior to the relevant registration deadline in order to remain compliant under UK REACH. Next slide. So for part 1, the deferred registration, a data waiver is required under section 13.2 of the NRES dossier in our Euclid. The purpose of this data waiver is to state clearly that the inclusion of the full information required for the registration dossier is being deferred until further down the line, such as when the registration dossier is to be submitted, as the information simply isn't available just now. So a reason for the data not being available could be that there's currently no lead registrant who has submitted a full and successful dossier. We've included an example of the NRES data waiver on this slide. As you can see, it's just a paragraph, so it's pretty straightforward. Next slide, please. The uses being required for an NRES dossier is a relatively new update to the MRES process. It's good practice to understand and maintain clear records of how you and your customers are using the substances or subsequent formulated products. If you're unsure, this is absolutely your opportunity to begin forging your path to compliance and engaging with customers prior to those registration deadlines. Note that the iEuclid format for uses and what is covered. So for example, we need to fill out the sector of use, product category, process category, and environmental release category, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So now let's have a look at your path to compliance under UK REACH. Next slide, thank you. There are several practical tips and proactive steps that you can take now to help ensure your organisation meets the UK REACH requirements. The key is to focus on strategic planning and effective compliance and making the most of this time that we all have now before those registration deadlines. Looking at the practical steps you can take, we strongly suggest that now is the ideal time to review your GB market substance portfolio. And once you've done that, or where applicable, you can submit the following. You can do your late doings. There's currently no deadline for when this window will close, but we are aware that is going to happen. So act now to be compliant. Where applicable, you can submit your inquiry dossiers. So that's for all substances that require a UK REACH registration, and then you can become a member of the substance group and start taking part in those early discussions. And again, where applicable, you can submit your NRES. So that's submitting the inquiry and the phase 1 of the MRES dossier. Don't forget that phase 2 is to be submitted later on, which is still prior to the registration deadline. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a few more steps that you can take for compliance purposes. Maintain accurate records of the tonnages for your substances. The key here is to review and update these records. If possible, I'd say maybe even on a quarterly basis. This helps track sales trends and anticipates any need to register in a higher or even perhaps a lower tonnage band than initially expected. Understand where the UK REACH registrations apply to you and identify if any substances used are exempt from registration. So for example, that could be naturally occurring low hazard substances and food additives, just to name 2. And lastly, verify the substance status under CLP and assess whether the hazard profile requires earlier registration based on factors that are beyond the tonnage. So for example, we've got CMRs over 1 tonne per annum must register by October 26, while substances on the candidate list have a deadline of October 28. And now I'll pass you back to Pietro. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for this section. Very appreciated. So, so the next section, we are actually looking on some questions that were submitted before the webinar. So, and also thanks for the participants who already sent some really interesting questions. We will also try to tackle a few of those as well. So let's start with the one that was submitted prior to the webinar. So let's see, question 1. If you meet the other global REACH requirements, do you automatically meet this one? Well, unfortunately, the answer is no. there isn't such a global REACH framework. The old or commonly known REACH regulation is now actually EU REACH. So if you want to enter the UK market, you need to apply for a UK REACH registration. So UK REACH applied to GB. So question 2, any way to import a grandfather substance by new importer? Amy, do you want to take this one, considering this was in your section?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. Grandfathered substances only applies to existing GB held registrations. A new importer would need to submit a registration to enter the GB market, I'd say via NRES. That is, unless their non-GB supplier has appointed an OR who has submitted the NRES. Looking at question 3, the differences between EU REACH and UK REACH, I'll take that one also. So I'll say they follow the same principle, that is to protect both human health and the environment, whilst avoiding the need for additional animal testing. So I would say that the core framework of the regulations are very similar, but not identical, and there is divergence. Examples of that would be the STS requirements, substances of very high concern, and Annex 17 restrictions. If we look at question 4, that is, what is the possibility of Swiss type UK REACH regulation? Pietro, I'm going to hand that back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, that's of course no problem. Thank you. Yeah, very interesting question. Thank you very much for asking. So if you look back at what the Swiss registration model is harmonized but parallel approach that incorporates significant elements of EU REACH to maintain the high safety standard and facilitates the trade. However, Swiss company engaging with EU markets must comply directly with EU REACH, often through a strategic partnership or representatives based in the EU. So to enter the UK market from outside GB, you must hold a valid UK REACH registration. So is effectively you are outside the GB at the moment. So probably this is something that will be discussed following the consultation, but you have to consider everyone's outside the GB and outside company. If you want to enter the market, you need to have a valid UK REACH registration.
Okay, fab, thank you. So let's look at question 5 now. That is, would the ATRM affect the product registration deadlines? So I'm going to let you take that one too, Pietro, because I think you covered that one.
Sure, no problem. So yeah, well, I covered that in one of the slides on the timeline. We know the consultation began in May 16, 2024. We were expecting response already by now. Well, the effective day was 17th of October. That didn't come, and then in the last 2 weeks we received an updates on the main website from the HSC and DEFRA saying that they will currently reviewing. They actually receive over 200 responses. They are currently reviewing those, and they will provide the update in early 2025. Then once that passed, they led to do a second consultation to put the new formats into legal text in 2025 still, and then we deny that the first registration deadlines is very close afterwards, so we can't say for sure. It's a possibility, but for now we do advise everyone to work on the main deadlines as it is at the moment. So the 27th of October 2026 being the first one, but obviously another advice that Amy also covers is to keep yourself updated within the market based on your needs.
Wow, thank you. And you know what, Pietro, since you're on a roll, I'm going to pass question 6 on to you also. I think you did cover that one. So what's the update on the registration fees?
Yeah, so at the latest CAN UK conference that we took part in Birmingham last May, the authority DEFRA suggested the UK's fee will be reviewed to ensure a more sustainable funding model, and including they were considering to explore a reduction of the current fees level for the UK REACH registration. So we believe there will be more competitive and helping company to enter the UK market, because it also is remain consistent to also allow to have the UK GB market to flourish as well, and remain relevant for company within the UK. But until the authority formally communicate the decision, the current fees stand. So please forecast accordingly, and do continue to monitor the official website. If you have substance that you have to enter the market now, unfortunately, the current price are applicable. We cannot say if the new model, the new fees will diminish in the next year, or so forth. So until then, the current fees applies. So keep an eye and budget accordingly based on your company needs. So thank you for that question. So yeah, so question 7, this is mainly for you, Amy, I believe. So if I send an inquiry, am I obliged to register?
Okay, so the answer to this is straightforward. No, you're not obligated to register if you've submitted an inquiry. So if you're unsure and you've reviewed your portfolio, we could suggest that you should go ahead and do that anyway. There will not be any fees from the HSC to do your inquiry.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. So on about number 8, does it still make sense to submit an LRES in light of the announcement of the alternative transitional registration model? Any significant impact on the NRES expected from the new model?
Okay, so we would say that if you need to enter the GB market right now, you do need to go ahead and submit that deferred registration. As Pietro did cover, we are currently waiting for an update on the ATRM in 2025. So I'm going to say that if you've done your compliance checks on your substances, you want to enter the GB market now, you've got to go ahead and submit that NRES dossier.
Thank you so much, Amy. So number 9, I'd like to know how we can do an only representative change on the registration, grandfathering or doing. Amy, you want to cover this, please?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So this requires what we call an asset transfer. This is performed in comply with UK REACH, and it's a very clear step-by-step process. I would say it talks you through quite nicely, so I wouldn't worry about that. But for the doings, these are not considered to be assets, so they cannot be transferred via the comply with UK REACH system. The HSC have previously advised that these can be transferred between legal entities, but that's with a clear paper trail and good record keeping. So just a couple of emails to confirm that they are being transferred. That should suffice for those. Okay.
Thank you.
And then, so let's take a look at question 10, last but not least. This is how to deal with polymers. They are themselves exempt from registration, but what to do with the monomers? Many of our monomers suppliers do not answer when we ask if they can cover our imported quantities into GB, how to stay compliant. So Pietro, because you've got experience of working in the polymer industry, did you want to take this one?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Amy. So yeah, so similar as already stated. So polymer are exempt currently, also in the under UK REACH. But yeah, so monomer need to be registered. So it's important to perform an assessment data gap. And mainly what we find to be a bit of a challenge is the tonnage, because some people can easily get confused by the tonnage of the polymer and the monomer. So sometimes the registration of the monomer itself is actually lower than the full polymer. So it's important to retain this for the operational purpose and then effectively apply the current classification based on the tonnage. So sometimes the good news is that less data required, because instead of, let's say, registering an 10 to 100 ton, you will actually only need to register a 1 ton registration. So a basic under 7 registration. So which is good. So thanks. So that was the final of the question that was submitted. We can take a couple from the floor receipts. I can start with this one. Scenario: I have a substance with the developing sales in the UK soon to exceed 1 ton. My substance was not registered. Was not registered. What do I do? Well, unfortunately, the substance was not registered on the UK REACH existing substance. What is the time frame for compliance with my substance as we exceeded as if we exceed 1 ton? And thus it get confirmed submitting the inquiry to the HSE. So basically, this is a tricky situation, but nevertheless, you are not yet exceeded 1 ton according to the question. One important thing, this will be part of a novel substance, so any substance at above 1 ton will have to be registered, fully registered, no such deferred registration. So inquiry must be submitted, and then the full Annex 7 or whatever applicable tonnage ban apply, all the registration needs to apply for the substance itself. So important. This is a normal registration that will be under UK REACH. So all the other question I can see from the floor, I got. So when we have same substance from a different supplier, do analytical data are needed for each supplier? Well, to some analytical data, you need to have the same substance, so you need to have a substance profile, and then analytical data mainly used for the inquiry. So it's important to make sure they are the same. So you have to assess what substance, and if the substance is the same. If there are different level of impurity, effectively you have to report this separately. Final one that we can take from the floor. If we are a member of a substance group as an inquiry company, is enough to benefit from the deferred registration? Unfortunately, here the answer is no. If you have submitted an inquiry, you are just part of the substance group. In order to submit the deferred registration, the next step following the inquiry and the acceptance from the authority is to then submit a deferred registration and pay the registration fees, and then you can discuss with the different substance group. But if you just submitted an inquiry, your registration is not complete. You just enter the substance group for discussion. But by submitting a deferred registration, you can place the substance in the market. So looking at a few other questions, I can confirm that they were all covered within the question and within the slides. So yeah, so this is call us for a day. So thank you so much for your attention throughout. I've seen the attendees remain quite high, so we thank you, appreciate. It'll be appreciated if you also can give us a few feedback on what you like to see next in the global regulatory, so we can put a new webinar for you. As everyone has seen within the registration, this is a two-part webinar. So in the next part, we will hopefully delivering in the new years, we will be mainly cover the alternative registration model more in detail. So open that the authorities will provide the summary, but we will cover it straight away for you and for all our attendees. But until then, we will wish you a good rest of the day. And if we don't speak before, have a great Christmas coming up. Thank you all.
Thank you.